October 22nd, 2341. DMA 14 sweep, night 6 of 8. Ambient 31 decibels. Wind calm. Ground temp 36. Op, RB, Tech, I, Petronek. The best sound in this business is nothing. And by 1:10 on the morning of the 23rd, I have 11 hydrants worth of nothing and 1 hydrant on Rittner Highway that will not stop talking. I'm parked in the Connect, with the side door open and my boots on the bumper, laptop on my knees, breath fogging. Evo is out at 14C with the tripod mic, crouched over the valve box like he's proposing to it. He's 27, and he has better ears than me, which is a thing I've mostly made peace with, and occasionally have not. "It's not a leak," he says in my headset. "It's a leak. It's 400 hertz, and it's steady, and it doesn't move when I move. Leaks move." "Leaks don't move, Evo. The sound field moves." "Yeah, and it doesn't." A pause, the scrape of the tripod repositioning. "Ren, come listen. Nobody puts this part of the job in the brochure. Leak detection happens between midnight and 4 because that's when the valley shuts up. No traffic on 81 to speak of. No dishwashers, no irrigation. No warehouse loading docks doing their thing out by the interchange. You clamp acoustic loggers to hydrant stems and valve keys. You let them sit a week. You come back and pull the overnight minimum noise levels, and the pipes tell you where they're bleeding. Cast iron carries a leak sound almost a mile if you're lucky, and the ground's wet. PVC will barely carry it 100 feet, and I have said unkind things about PVC in front of children. The frost is coming up on the grass in that gray, patchy way it does before it commits. I put the headset on the good side, and Evo hands me the rod. He's right. It isn't a leak. A pressurized main has a texture. People think it's silence in there, but it's not. It's a dense, packed quiet. Water under 55 psi holding still against the walls, and the sound of it sits closer to weight than to noise. What comes through 14C is thinner than that. There's air in the top of the pipe. Not much. Maybe an inch of column separation somewhere upstream. Air pulled in through a vacuum valve that had a reason to open. "Okay," I say. "That's a transient. Somebody killed a pump wrong." "At 1 in the morning? Somebody's always killing a pump wrong." I write it in the log. 14-C, air in crown. Possible negative transient. Notify CVWA-AM. And I'm still writing when every logger on the map goes quiet at once. Not offline. Quiet. The dashboard shows 12 green dots and 12 live traces, and every trace drops to the floor of its scale and stays there. Flat at 147 and change. My loggers sample noise, not pressure. A flat trace at that level doesn't mean a sensor died. It means the thing they're clamped to has stopped being a water pipe. My first reaction, and I want this on the record because I've had a long time to think about my reactions. I turn around and I say, "What did you update?" Evo says, "Nothing." "You updated the firmware." "I updated the firmware in August, Ren." 12 units do not go flat in the same second unless a human being did something to them. He doesn't argue. He gets that look he gets, the one where he goes polite, which is worse than if he yelled. He walks back to 14C and drops the rod on the stem and listens about 6 seconds, then takes the headset off and holds it out to me at arm's length like it's something he found in a drain. There's nothing in the pipe, no air, no water, nothing pushing on anything. October 23rd, 1:53. 14C, Rittner Highway. No column. Rod reads open volume. Repeat 11A, 12B. Same. I call the CVWA after-hours line at 2:04 and get a man named Denny, who I've met twice, and who has both times called me Rennie. I tell him I've got a district that sounds empty. He tells me SCADA is green across the authority. I tell him SCADA is repeating what it was told, and that I'm standing on a valve box on Rittner listening to a 12-inch main with nothing in it. He says the word modeling, which in the mouth of a night operator means go away. Here's what I did next, and it's the first of the two things. I did not drive to the Montgomery Street pump station 9 minutes away. I did not wake up the district engineer, whose cell number has been in my phone since 2019. Instead, I drove to 4 more hydrants in DMA 14 and documented all of them. Timestamps, audio files, photographs of my own screen with the flat traces on it. At 3:40, I sat in the truck behind the Dollar General on Hanover, started a folder called CVWA_2310_event, and felt, underneath the alarm, a small, clean spike of something I'd call vindication, if I were being generous with myself. Because I'd told them. 18 months earlier I told them, and they made me unsay it. And now the pipes were empty, and I was the only person in Cumberland County with instruments in the ground. Evo asked what we were doing. I said building a record. He said, for who? May 7th, prior year, 2:14. DMA 14 step test, night 2. Sequence V104, V109, V112, V117. District meter logging 15-second interval. Spring before last, CVWA hired me to do a district-by-district water audit, which they did not want to do and were doing because the state had started making noises about non-revenue water. Non-revenue water is everything you treat and pump and don't get paid for. Real losses through leaks, apparent losses through bad meters and theft, and the unaccounted remainder that every utility in America carries on the books like a mole they've decided not to have looked at. The rule of thumb is that a system in decent shape runs 12 to 15%. Old systems on limestone run 20. Carlisle's North districts came in at 22, which is bad but not remarkable. DMA 14 came in at 41%. I ran it 3 times. Then I did a full step test, which works like this. At 2 in the morning, when nobody's using anything, you close valves one at a time and watch the district meter. Each closure isolates a chunk of pipe. If the flow drops 80 gallons a minute when you close V109, your leak lives behind V109, and you go dig behind V109. 2 nights, usually. It's the most satisfying thing I know how to do. The loss has an address, and you make it give up the address. DMA 14 didn't step. I closed every valve in the district, one after another. And the minimum night flow came down proportionally with each closure, evenly, like I was subtracting slices from a system that was losing water everywhere at the same rate. Leaks are located. That's the whole premise of my profession. 8 nights of loggers on everything. Not one leak signature. The quietest 41% I have ever heard. I wrote it up honestly. The loss was real, distributed, acoustically silent. In karst terrain, the responsible next step was a tracer study, because we sit on Ordovician limestone that has been dissolving since before there were fish in it worth catching, and because I didn't want to be the contractor who writes "I don't know" in a report and then stops. Curtis Rehm read it in his office in Mechanicsburg, with the door open and his reading glasses pushed up into his hair, and he was quiet a long time, and then he said, "Ren, I can't file this." Curtis is a compact, careful man who irons his jeans. He's been the district engineer at CVWA for 16 years, and I want to be fair here, because fairness is the only thing I've got left to offer him. He is genuinely good at his job. You can file it. It's true. We're 11 weeks from a rate case. If I file a 41% loss in one district, the interveners get it in discovery, and then the argument stops being about capital replacement and becomes about mismanagement. And the commission gives us 4 points instead of 9. And I don't replace the Newville transmission line. which I have been trying to replace since Obama. So tell them it's karst. Karst is what I'd be guessing. And if I guess wrong in a filing, I'm done. He took the glasses out of his hair. Give me a version that says meter error at the district boundary and recommends a meter verification study, which is also true. Your boundary meters are 11 years old. They're 11 years old, and they're fine. They're 11 years old. Let me explain what $4,200 was to me that May. Evo had been with me 8 months, and I'd just put him on the books full-time with an actual insurance contribution, which I was proud of in a way I did not tell anybody about. I had a 9-year-old correlator with a bad channel and a van that needed a transmission. CVWA was 58% of my annual revenue. If I filed the honest report and Curtis couldn't use it, the September renewal goes to an outfit in Allentown that undercuts me 9% and does the work with a college kid and a rented stick. I rewrote it. Meter verification study recommended. Signed it May 9th. The check cleared May 9th because I walked it to the bank myself. That's the first thing. I've told it plainly because the rest of this doesn't work otherwise. October 23rd, 7:40. CVWA Ops, Room 2. Attending approximately 22. No potable service authority wide. Sensors, no recovery. By 7 that morning, the news has it. And the news has it wrong in an interesting way. They're saying 9 states. That becomes the number, immediately and permanently 9 states. Then 13 by noon when the partial reports come in. And the graphics people shade whole states because a state is the shape a map is allowed to be on television. When the survey finally publishes the real footprint 11 days later, it isn't 9 of anything. It's a long, crooked ribbon running southwest to northeast, wide in the coastal plain, narrow, and forked through the ridge and valley, following carbonate bedrock and the aquifer systems under it, ignoring every line a legislature ever drew. It looks like a root. It looks like something that grew. In the ops building, a room built for 9 people contains 22, and the first argument of the day is about my invoice. Not really. It's about whether I'm allowed to be in here. A woman from the Authorities Council's office wants to know my contract vehicle, whether my data is discoverable, whether I've spoken to press, Curtis says. Without looking up from the wall map. He's the only one with instruments that didn't go blind, Marla. Let him sit down. That's the end of that. And I sit down. And I'm ashamed of how good it feels. The State Geological Survey sends Vidya Ramnath, who arrives at 8:15 with a laptop, a thermos, and the expression of a woman who has already been asked to speculate on camera and has already declined. 50 or so. Gray coming in at the temples in one streak she plainly doesn't care about. For the first hour, she says almost nothing except to ask people to define their terms, which annoys everyone and is the most useful thing anybody does all morning. By 9, the room's theory is karst. It's everybody's theory. It's the theory because a swimming pool went into the ground in Camp Hill in 2019. And a warehouse pad off 81 needed 400 grouted holes before they could pour it. And because everyone here has been told since childhood that there's Swiss cheese under their feet. Karst is the local explanation for everything. If your cat goes missing in Cumberland County, somebody will say karst. And karst is almost right, which is the trap. There are documented swallets in this valley where a surface stream goes into the ground and comes out 4 miles away. Conduit flow in limestone moves water faster than any textbook aquifer. Tell me a sinkhole opened under a transmission main in Ada District. I'd believe you before breakfast. Vidya waits until the third person says it, then asks, "Where are the sinkholes?" Nobody has one. Not a single collapse feature reported anywhere in the valley overnight. You cannot move that volume through carbonate rock without moving sediment, and you cannot move sediment without the ground coming down. Also, she says, karst is local. Half of this is in the Piedmont crystalline. There's no karst in the Piedmont crystalline. There's no porosity in the Piedmont crystalline. She looks up. I'd like to see the contractor's overnight data. I hand her a drive. She plugs it in, listens to 90 seconds of 14C on her own earbuds with her eyes closed, and says, "How long is your archive?" 18 months in this valley. "Keep it," she says, and gives me the drive back, and I feel my heart do something unhelpful. October 23rd, 9:10. Shippensburg Zone 4, Borough Contract, Units 4A through 4D, loss of column, standalone loggers, no telemetry dependency. Zone 4 goes to atmosphere, and I know it because those 4 units are battery-powered and off-network, which is the entire reason they survived the night they weren't talking to anything. So nothing could stop them talking. The file from 4B is a main system with no water in it and no pressure on it, and the specific hollow ring of a 110-year-old cast iron pipe being nothing but a tube. I reported it. Let me be exact about what I reported. At 9:22, I told the room that Shippensburg Zone 4 was showing loss of column. It went in the log, it went out to the county, and it was one line among roughly 200 that morning, because by then, every zone anyone physically checked was showing loss of column. What I did not do was open CVWA_2310_event, go one folder up into the archive, and say out loud, I have 18 months of overnight recordings from this valley. I have had a district losing 41% for a year and a half. There is a signed document in your files that attributes it to meter error, and my name is on it. I thought about it. I sat in a room full of people who couldn't explain anything, and I ran the moment in my head. And what I saw was not a moral reckoning. What I saw was Marla from counsel's office turning her head, so I sat on it. Told myself I'd raise it when there was a person to raise it to. Told myself the archive was proprietary, which was true, and that it wouldn't change anything today, which I'll get to. October 23rd, 11:30. Boiling Springs Lake, West Shore. Stage minus 4.1 feet estimated. Hydrophone deployed 11:52. Water temp 51.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Vidya asks us to go, and we go, because everything else has stopped making sense in a way that at least has the decency to be boring. Boiling Springs is a town built around a lake that isn't a lake so much as a widening in a spring. 30-odd vents in the bottom push about 20 million gallons a day of 52-degree water up out of the limestone. And they do it every day of the year, in August, in ice storms, since before anybody was keeping track. The Latort runs off it. Fly fishermen come from 4 states to stand in it and catch nothing and be happy about it. The water is down about 4 feet, and the ducks are standing on mud. You can see the vents. That's the thing I keep. Normally they sit 8 or 9 feet down, and all you get on the surface is a boil, a soft dome that never breaks, which is where the name comes from. With the lake down, you can look straight into 2 of them, and they are not boiling. They're drinking. There's a slow dimple over each vent and a spiral in the silt around it, and a mat of dead elodea going down into the near one in a lazy rotation. 40 feet out, in water that should be over his head, a man in chest waders is standing and shouting at the vent. Not shouting about it, at it. He's got a net in one hand, and he's telling it to stop. And 30 yards away across the exposed lake bed, 4 teenagers are filming him. Evo says, springs don't do that. No. Like Wren, springs can't do that. That's the definition of a spring. It's the part where the water comes. I know what a spring is. He lets it go. He gets down on the bank with the hydrophone, puts it in the shallows, and I watch his face change. He hands me the can. Underneath the water noise, there's a tone. Low, maybe 11 or 12 hertz, right at the bottom edge of where the hydrophone is honest. It isn't pulsing, and it isn't modulating. It's just there, the way a fluorescent ballast is there. In a building, you'd assume a machine on another floor. I record 90 seconds of it. That file is the reason I have the contract I have now. And it's the only genuinely irreplaceable thing I've ever recorded. And I will never be allowed to play it for you. Driving out, Ivo says, "You going to send it to somebody?" "To who?" "I don't know. Penn State. Somebody with a big computer. It's 12 hertz and 100 decibels of mud. It's not a message." I didn't say it was a message. He didn't. I'd been the one to say it. October 23rd, 12:50. Personal. No log. Simone calls from her mother's house and opens with, "Are you being weird about this?" "Hello to you. Because Mom says you're going to show up with jugs and be weird about it." She's 15. She has been 15 for approximately 9 years. Ellis has her Sunday to Sunday this week, and Ellis is a good mother in the specific and irritating way where she's right about most things and enjoys it. "I have 4 cases in the truck." "We have water, Dad. We have the pool, and Mom filled the tubs, and I already made a spreadsheet." "You made a spreadsheet?" "There's a group chat for the whole neighborhood, and I made a sheet where people put what they have and what they need. And there's a map layer for houses with somebody old in them. And Mrs. Detweiler's on oxygen, so she's flagged. And we're doing a run at 3 from the Weiss in Newville because their well's on generator and they're letting people fill." A breath. "So don't come be weird." I said something to my daughter then that I'd like to take back. I said, "Sweetheart, this isn't a snow day." And Simone, who by that point had organized more actual relief than Cumberland County's Emergency Management Office had managed since 1:47 that morning, said "okay" in the flat voice, hung up, and didn't answer my next 2 texts. Her sheet had 640 rows on it by 4 in the afternoon. The county linked to it from their homepage at 6. October 23rd, 1622. Scanner, Cumberland/Franklin Mutual Aid. 200 Block Ridge Avenue, Shippensburg. Structure, occupied. Exposures both sides. I'm not there. I'm in the gravel lot of a Rutter's on 11 eating a chicken sandwich with the scanner app going because I keep it running the way other people keep music on. I hear the tone out, and then I hear a lieutenant say on tape at 4:31. "We have no water at 321. Repeat, hydrant 321 is dry. We need tankers." Row houses. 1910s construction, common attic, balloon frame behind the brick. Once it's into the attic run, it goes sideways and it goes fast. And the entire architecture of fighting it is that you get water on it in the first 8 minutes, or you lose the block. They got tankers. A tanker operation is a shuttle. A rural department can put maybe 250 gallons a minute on a structure that way if everything goes perfectly and the fill site is close. A working row house fire wants 1,000. 4 houses. A firefighter named Kip Sando went through a porch roof and broke his pelvis in 3 places, and he's walking now, mostly. And a woman named Junie Meckley, 71, who ran the consignment shop on King Street, came out of the second house on her own 2 feet and was talking to a paramedic and then wasn't, and spent 11 days on a ventilator, and came off it and went home and died the 2nd week of February of a pneumonia that her daughter's obituary notice described, generously, as unrelated. I read that obituary on my phone in a Sheetz parking lot in Chambersburg between 2 service calls. I read it, and I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. And I finished my coffee and I drove to the next call, because I had a next call. Here's the part I can't get to sit still. I knew Zone 4 was empty at 9:10 that morning. I said so, in the room, out loud, and it went in a log. By noon, every fire department in the valley knew the hydrants were unreliable, because every hydrant in 9 states was unreliable, and it was the top story on every channel in America. So when I run it honestly, and I have run it maybe 400 times, my archive doesn't save Junie Meckley. Nothing I was holding would have put water in that hydrant at 4:31 in the afternoon. What I withheld didn't matter. That's the finding. It doesn't help even slightly, because the reason I withheld it wasn't that it didn't matter. I didn't yet know whether it mattered. I withheld it because of Marla turning her head. And the fact that the universe declined to punish me for that is not the same as the universe letting me off. October 23rd, 2100. Cumberland County, EOC, Carlisle. Assigned pressure zone map annotation, tanker fill site sighting. Unpaid. They put me at a folding table with a laminated map and a wet erase marker, because I'm the person in the building who can look at a distribution schematic and say which zones are gravity fed off which tank, and where a tanker can pull 1,000 gallons without kneecapping a hospital. Here's what that night was actually like, since television gets it wrong in both directions. There's no shouting. There's a Baptist church kitchen sending over pans of ziti that nobody eats until midnight, and then everybody eats at once. There's an argument about porta-johns that lasts 50 minutes and matters more than anything else discussed all night, because a county of 260,000 people with no water needs somewhere for those people to go. And the vendor is in Harrisburg, and the vendor's trucks are already committed to Dauphin County. There's a man from a nursing home in Mount Holly who calls the EOC line every 90 minutes, not because anything has changed, but because he needs to hear that we still know his building exists. Somebody assigns a volunteer to just call him back, unprompted, every hour. That volunteer's whole job for 11 hours is telling one man that he hasn't been forgotten. I thought that was the most competent decision made in the room. Around 2, Vidya comes and sits across the folding table with a laptop and a cold pierogi. I need to say a thing to somebody who won't repeat it, she says. Then you've picked wrong. I repeat everything. She turns the screen around anyway. It's a piezometer trace out of a monitoring well near Mount Rock, one of the survey's own, and it's reading below 0. Negative head, she says, which is an instrument fault. Okay. It's 5 instruments in 5 wells. 2 of them are different makes. I look at the trace for a while. Piezometric head is the pressure the water in an aquifer would push up to if you gave it a straw. Negative head means the straw is being sucked on. So it's a real measurement, I say. It's a real measurement of something that has no mechanism. She takes the laptop back. Do you know what happens if I put that in a bulletin tonight? The bulletin is the record. 20 years from now, the bulletin is what exists. And if the number's an artifact, I've put an artifact in the permanent scientific record of the most studied event of my career. And everything else I wrote is now suspect. And if you leave it out, then I've left out the only measurement anybody's going to care about. She eats the pierogi. I'm going to leave it out tonight and put it in the 10-day with the error bars and the caveats and a paragraph explaining why I didn't publish it on the 23rd. That's a hedge. That's a record, she says. You want me brave? Brave is cheap. I want somebody in 2062 to be able to use this. I told her I understood. Sitting at that table with a wet erase marker in my hand, I thought I was agreeing with her about epistemology. I've since worked out that I was taking notes on how to justify things. October 24th, 3:41. Boiling Springs Lake Bed. On foot. Vidya R plus 2. Burrow PD1. I. Petronek. Portable piezo in MW3, reading -2.4 feet and rising. The event ran 26 hours and 11 minutes. Worth saying, because you'll read 24 everywhere. The internet settled on 24 inside a day and never let go. Partly because 147 to 147 is a shape people like. And partly because the restoration came in a ragged front over about 2 hours. And you can make almost any number you want out of a ragged front. I've corrected it maybe 50 times. It grows back like mold. The return, where I was for it, was not gentle. At 3:51, the tone comes up. You feel it in the mud through your boots before you hear it. Then you hear it. And it isn't 11 hertz anymore. It's a whole stack of frequencies climbing, and the mud starts to fizz. Evo says, "Back up," and grabs the strap of my case, and the near vent goes. It doesn't erupt. There's footage from that night with 2 million views on it that's been slowed down and scored with strings, and in that version, it's a geyser. And it wasn't. The lake bed inflates. A dome of water rises over the vent, maybe 2 feet proud of the surface, and holds for something like 9 seconds. A glassy standing mound with a dead weed turning slowly on top of it. And then it lies down, and the water comes across the flat in a sheet at about the speed of a jogging dog. We run, ankle deep, then knee deep, and the cold takes your legs off. 52-degree water is not cold. This was 39, 38, measured, and it came through the seams of my boots like a hand. I lose the correlator. $9,000, 4 years old, still in the Pelican case with the lid unlatched because I'm the man who leaves the lid unlatched. It goes off the tailgate, and the sheet takes it, and I never see it again. Evo goes down in the parking lot and opens his palm on the curb and needs 6 stitches, and spends the next 6 weeks telling people he was injured in the event, which is technically true and which I have never once corrected. Behind us, up the slope, the ground opens under the back tire of the Burrow Cop's Tahoe, small one, 4 feet across. It takes the wheel and stops, and the Tahoe sits there tilted with its light bar going. That is the only sinkhole reported in Cumberland County all week. And it happened on the return, not the drainage. And Vidya stood in 6 inches of moving water looking at it with an expression I've thought about a great deal since. By 9 that morning, the lake was full. By noon, it was over full, 1.5 inches above the spillway crest. And the vents were boiling the way they're supposed to boil. The fly fishermen were back in the Latort by the weekend, saying it was fishing better than it had in years, which was true, and which turned out to matter more than anything else in this story. November 1st. Sampling support, 9 sites. Chain of custody per PADEP. No findings authored by RB. Now the part where it stops being a disaster and starts being an opportunity. I didn't see it coming. And I should have. Water quality sampling begins before the pressure is even back, because it has to. You don't restore a system that's been to atmosphere without assuming it's contaminated. Negative pressure transients pull groundwater and worse in through every joint and hairline in the network. And the standard playbook is a boil advisory, a chlorine burn, flushing, 2 consecutive clean sample sets, and about 11 days of misery. The first sample sets come back clean, not merely passing, clean, no total coliform fine. But also, chlorine residual holding at levels that make no sense in mains that had been empty, and turbidity at 0.04 NTU straight out of a hydrant. And then the numbers start arriving from the labs with the expensive machines, and they are, in Vidya's word when she called me, stupid. No tritium, Tritium is the marker of anything that fell as rain since the 50s. The bomb tests put it in the atmosphere. And it's how you tell young water from old. Below detection limit, valley-wide. No PFAS-0, across a suite of 40 compounds, in a valley with 2 airfields and 60 years of firefighting foam in the soil. In wells that had tested at 11 parts per trillion in July. Nothing on microplastics. Nitrate gone, in an agricultural valley whose nitrate problem is older than my mother. Stable isotope ratios that don't sit on the local meteoric water line, or on anybody's meteoric water line, for the last several thousand years. Radiocarbon on the dissolved inorganic carbon came back. At the first 3 sites, at 10,200 to 10,800 years before present. The water that came back is older than the valley's agriculture, older than its people, and it is the cleanest municipal supply in the United States. Vidya told me this on November 4th from a parking lot with Wind on the mic. Ren, I need you to understand the position this puts everyone in. I said I didn't. You will. November 19th. No fieldwork. Watched live stream from Valve Pit, Lowther Street. I understood when the governor stood at the Boiling Springs spillway with a glass in his hand. Good glass, too. Whoever staged it did nice work. Low sun, water going over the crest behind him. A couple of authentic-looking guys in Carhartts placed at the correct distance. He drank it. He said, "The cleanest water in America twice, and we don't have all the answers once." And a woman from the Department of Community and Economic Development said opportunity 9 times in 4 minutes, which I counted, because I was watching on a phone in a valve pit, and counting things is what I do to keep from talking. 3 weeks later, there's a private label on the shelf at the Giant in Carlisle, called Ancient Valley Artesian, white-tailed deer on the front. A claim on the back about 10,000-year-old water, which is not a lie. A data center consortium that had been sitting on a site option out by the interchange for 2 years exercises it in January. Because clean cooling water at that volume is worth more than the land is. There's a state grant program by February. There's a hydrology institute announced at the university with a name that took a committee. Underneath all of it is arithmetic. Nobody has to say out loud. The region took 26 hours of hell and came out the other side with recharged aquifers, restored springs, better fishing, a solved nitrate problem, a solved PFAS problem, and an economic development story that writes itself. The federal declaration closed after 9 days. The USGS report, when it lands in March, is a beautiful document, 40 pages of exquisitely characterized data with a conclusion section you can read 4 times without finding a conclusion in it. That's not cowardice. I've read it, and I'd have written the same thing. There's nothing to conclude. There's only what happened. What I noticed is that nobody was unhappy about that. An unexplained event that leaves you worse off gets an investigation. An unexplained event that leaves you better off gets a brand. February 4th. Middlesex Township Supervisors, public comment. Attended, did not speak. The one person who tried is a woman named Dot Yingst, who farms 90 acres off Wagoner's Gap, and who stands up at the microphone in a township building in February with 11 pages of printouts. Her argument is not sophisticated, and it is not wrong. She says, something took the water out from under us on a schedule and gave it back better, and now 3 companies are putting straws in it, and nobody has established what happens the next time the schedule comes around. And she would like the township to pass a resolution requesting a moratorium on new high-volume withdrawal permits until the state can say what the event was. The solicitor explains that the township lacks authority over water allocation, which is accurate. A supervisor says the data center is projected to bring in $1.4 million a year in host fees. And the school district is at 11 mills. Somebody's husband in the third row says the word hysteria, loud enough to be heard and not loud enough to be gavelled. Dot gets 90 seconds more and uses them to say that her well ran dry on the 23rd and came back at 40 gallons a minute, up from 12. And she wants everybody to notice how happy that made them all, and to ask themselves what they'd agree to next time. The vote is 5-0 against the resolution. Coffee afterward, folding table, those cookies from the club store. I was standing by the coffee with my jacket on, and Dot came over and asked if I was the leak guy, and I said yes. And she asked me straight out whether I'd found anything before the 23rd. I said the audits were confidential to the authority. She said, "That's not a no." I said it wasn't a yes either, which is the kind of sentence you construct in the 2 seconds when you've decided to lie and haven't yet decided to admit it. She looked at me the way you look at a fence you've just realized is electrified, and said, "Okay," and went and got her coat. 12/12. C-factor testing support, 9 segments, Carlisle North. Hydrant flow plus parallel gauge, op. RB. The other thing the water did, and this piece is mine, I found it is that it cleaned the pipes. You have to understand what a 110-year-old cast iron main looks like inside. It looks like a coral reef. Tuberculation, iron oxide nodules, decades of them, growing inward off the wall in knuckles and cauliflower until the effective bore of an 8-inch pipe is 5 inches. The friction coefficient is garbage, and every fire flow calculation in the borough carries a fudge factor that somebody's grandfather guessed at in 1974. That's the actual condition of the drinking water infrastructure of the eastern United States, not the crumbling, the narrowing. In December, CVWA runs C-factor tests on 9 segments, because system pressure is up and nobody can explain that either. And they call me in on the flow side. A C-factor is a roughness number. New pipe is 130 or 140. The 1913 cast iron under East North Street tested at 61. In 2016, and I have the sheet, because I did that test, it came back 138. I made them run it again. I made them run 3 more segments. Then I got a borough crew to cut a coupon out of a main on Willow, a physical sample, 4 inches of pipe wall, 106-year-old cast iron, and I sat in the shop with it under a work light for a long time. It's clean, and it isn't scoured, which is the part that keeps me up. Scouring leaves, scratches, directionality, deposit shadows downstream of every obstruction. This is smooth, and it's evenly smooth, and the biofilm is gone. And the graphitization on the interior is gone in a way I have no mechanism for. And the metal is bright and gray and looks like something that has just been made. I brought the coupon to the operations meeting in January and set it on the table. Evo, who was not supposed to speak in that meeting, said, "Somebody flushed the lines." And I said, in front of 11 people, "That's the dumbest thing anyone has said out loud in this room." Which was cruel and also inaccurate, since I'd been in that room for a great many meetings. He didn't say anything back. He stayed to the end and carried the case out to the truck, and then in the parking lot, in the tone of a man reading a prepared statement. He told me that Priya was due in April, and that the consortium had offered him a position, and that he was going to take it if I didn't put in for the monitoring contract, because he needed the insurance. I asked him how long he'd had the offer. "Since the 12th. "You could have led with the baby." "I did lead with the baby," he said. "You weren't there for it. You've been in Willow Street with a piece of pipe for a month." March 12th. No fieldwork. Term sheet review. The monitoring contract. Let me lay it out, because it's the hinge. The consortium, the data center people, 2 bottlers, the University Institute, and the state, in a structure that took 9 lawyers, needs continuous acoustic and pressure monitoring across the carbonate belt in Cumberland and Franklin counties. Not because they're worried, because their insurers are worried. And because you cannot finance a $900 million facility on a water supply that recently disappeared without an instrumentation program in the pitch deck. $410,000 a year for 3 years with an equipment allowance. Bragg's subsurface grossed $209,000 last year. Gross, before Evo's salary and before the transmission. The terms include an NEDA covering all collected data, all historical data incorporated into the baseline, and all findings, with a consortium holding publication rights and a review period of 180 days. I read that clause in the Wendy's on Hanover at 10:30 at night with a Frosty going liquid beside me, and I laughed out loud, because 18 months earlier a man had asked me to change one word in one report for $4,200, and I'd said yes. And here was the same transaction arriving with a term sheet, a signing bonus, and a lawyer named Grant who called me Rennick. Vidya took their chief scientist position in February. I called her about it, and I was not nice, and she let me not be nice for about 90 seconds. And then she said, "The survey has no budget line for this, none." I asked twice. If I stay, I write one more report that nobody funds a follow-up on. And in 3 years, the samples get discarded because there's no cold storage and no line item to build any. If I go, I have 11 monitoring wells, continuous isotope sampling, and a mass spec. The data will exist. Somebody's name will be on the door of the room it's in. Those are the 2 options, and if you've got a third one, Ren, I'm listening. And please don't say the press, because I've talked to the press. I asked what happened when she talked to the press. A very good reporter spent 5 weeks on it and filed 2,200 words. And her editor cut the precursor material because a single anonymous contractor's unpublished archive isn't a source. And what ran was a nice piece about the bottling plant. She let that sit for a second, and then she said the honest part. And I was relieved. That's the thing I'd want you to know about me. When it got cut, I was relieved. March 18th. Call log O Mancuso, Harrisburg. 41 minutes. I did phone Odile Mancuso. People assume the draft email is the first move, and it isn't. It's the second. She's smart and slow, and she doesn't publish until she's sure. And she gave me 41 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon while I sat in the truck outside of Turkey Hill. I described the precursors without giving her the files. She asked good questions in the right order. How do you know the transients aren't traffic? How do you know your clock is right? Has anyone independently reproduced the timing? Is there a second archive anywhere in the affected region with comparable resolution? The answers were, because they don't have the spectral signature of a plate strike, because I disciplined to GPS, no, and probably not. Then she asked the one that ended it. If I publish this, what's the strongest thing a hostile reader can say about you? I said that I'm a contractor whose business tripled after the event, who is under NDA to the beneficiaries, who signed a report he knew to be incomplete, and who is now the sole custodian of the only data that would corroborate him. There was a pause with keyboard in it. That's a very complete answer, she said. Most people don't give me that. Does it help? It makes me trust you more, and it makes the story harder. Those aren't intention. That's just how it works. She said she wanted a second archive, or a scientist willing to be named, or the raw files with the NDA risk on my side. She said she'd hold the door open. The door has now been open for 11 months. I check on it sometimes the way you check that a pilot light is still lit. November 2nd. Archive reanalysis. DMA14, retrospective. Filter bypass, 310 to 645. Since I keep raw files, I have the precursors. That's the only professional decision in this entire account I'm proud of. I found them on a Saturday morning in November, in my kitchen, with the radiator ticking and a cold cup of coffee, because I decided to rerun 18 months of overnight data with my noise gate switched off, which is a stupid thing to do, and takes 9 hours and produces mostly the sound of tractor trailers. Once a month for at least 14 months before the event, and probably longer than my archive reaches, there's an acoustic transient in the Carlisle North districts lasting between 2.4 and 2.9 seconds. Amplitude is tiny, 30-35 decibels above my noise floor, comfortably inside what any sane analyst filters out as a truck going over a manhole lid. I filtered it out. I filtered it out for a year. They aren't random. Each starts within a second and a half of 1:47 a.m. local, and each arrives approximately 0.4 of a second earlier than the one before it. The spacing doesn't track any tide, any pump schedule, any billing cycle, any lunar or solar period that Vidya's people or the Institute's people, or a very patient man at an observatory in West Virginia has been able to fit to it. It's a clock. It just isn't a clock keeping time with anything I know about. And a 41% loss in one district, distributed, silent, unlocatable, sitting in a filing cabinet under the heading meter error. Verification study recommended is the sound of something taking small amounts of water out of the Cumberland Valley once a month for at least a year and a half while it worked out how much we had. I sat in my kitchen with that for about 20 minutes. Then I did the dishes, which I remember because I did them badly and had to do them again that night. March 24th. CVWA Ops, parking lot, off the clock. I had one conversation with Curtis Ream about all of it. In March, the two of us leaning on the same guardrail and facing the road instead of each other, which is how men our age have conversations. I told him I was going to submit the archive to the Institute as an independent baseline, meaning publish the 18 months out of DMA 14, meaning the precursors. I said most of it, not the last sentence, not the one about something working out how much we had. I've never said that out loud to anyone. He listened with his arms folded, and when I finished, he said, "Okay. Okay? You want me to fight you?" He almost smiled. "I'm not going to fight you. Publish it. I'll sign whatever cover letter you want." Then, "But when you publish, you're publishing the May report too, right? Because your archive shows a 41% loss in a district where the filed document says meter error. And somebody's going to ask why those two things don't match." "Yes." "Then say it here first, so I know how you'll say it. Whose signature is on that report?" "Mine." "And who cashed on the 9th of May?" I didn't answer. "I asked you to write a version that was also true," he said. "That was a rotten thing to do, and I've thought about it more than you'd guess. But I didn't hold a gun on you, Ren. And you didn't call the commission. And you didn't call the county. And you didn't do it in September either. When the renewal came through at 9% over Allentown, who bid lower, I got you that." He pushed off the guardrail. "So publish, genuinely. But don't come at me like you're the survivor of something." He went inside. He'd left his reading glasses up in his hair again, and I stood in the parking lot furious about how badly I wanted to tell him. March 30th, no fieldwork. Executed MSA plus NDA, Camp Hill. I didn't publish. I signed the consortium contract at a conference table with Grant across from me, flipping pages, and the archive went into the baseline, where it is now a licensed asset. I have a badge with my photograph on it that gets me into a room with a mass spectrometer I will never operate. Evo has insurance. The baby's name is Nell. She has a head like a cantaloupe, and her photograph is taped to the dash of a truck that is not a Transit Connect anymore. He and I are cordial. We work 11 miles apart, and we text about equipment. In August, he sent me a picture of Nell asleep on a spectrum analyzer with the caption, "She says your gate settings are cowardly," and I laughed alone in a parking lot for a while. In May, I went into the consignment shop on King Street, which Junie Meckley's daughter was clearing out. I told myself I was looking for a dresser. Her name is Charity, she's about my age, and she was pricing a box of costume jewelry with a marker between her teeth. She recognized me from the paper I'd been in a photo standing behind the governor's shoulder at the spillway, which I hadn't known about until my sister sent it to me. She was perfectly nice. She said, "You're the water guy." I said I was sorry about her mother. She said thank you and told me that Junie had gotten out of the house on her own and had gone back in for a neighbor's dog, and that the dog was fine, and that she was still deciding how she felt about the dog. I stood there with an unwanted dresser in front of me and every part of the true thing available in my mouth. And what I said was, the hydrant was dry. The whole valley was dry. There was nothing anybody could have done that day. Which is true. She thanked me for saying it. She said it helped to hear it from someone who'd know. I bought the dresser. It's in my garage. I've never brought it inside. April 16th. Personal. No log. Simone asked me for the data in April. That's the piece I'd cut out of this if I were building it for effect, and it's the reason I'm not. She's doing an independent study, a documentary thing, 40 minutes. And it's genuinely good. She interviewed Kip Sando. She interviewed a hydrologist at Millersville. She found the man from the chest waders, and he cried on camera, which mortified her, and which she handled better than most professionals would have. She came to my kitchen with her laptop and asked, very carefully, in the voice she uses when she's decided in advance not to fight with me, whether she could have the overnight files from DMA 14 for the year before. The little 2-second ones. She knew about the little 2-second ones. She'd read the Institute's preliminary, which mentions weighted periodic low-amplitude transients of undetermined origin in a single sentence on page 31 and doesn't say where they came from or how far back they go. I told her I didn't have them anymore. Not they're under NDA, which was true, and which she'd have understood, and which would have made her furious in a way we'd have gotten over. I said I didn't have them, and I watched my daughter accept that because her father said it, and write something down. They screened it in the school library in May. 41 people in folding chairs, a projector with a bad green cast. The last shot is the boiling springs vents in slow motion, boiling the way they're supposed to, and a title card that says the cause of the event has not been determined. Afterward, the teacher who ran the program shook my hand and said Simone had really wanted to include something about warning signs, but hadn't been able to source it. February 11th, a 238, HID, 6-D, Kerrsville Road Extension, Newville, ambient low, wind 4 miles per hour west, ground temp 34, consortium array, sector 3. It's February, and I'm parked on a farm lane between 2 soybean fields with the stubble frosted and the truck off, because the heater fan runs 41 decibels on low, and 41 decibels is the difference between hearing this and not. The rig is better than anything I've ever owned. The hydrophone alone cost more than my first van. 11 wells, 240 logger positions, a data pipeline that dumps to a server in a building with a key card. It is, without qualification, the best instrumented patch of ground in North America. I built it, And it works. There's a draft email on my phone to Odile Mancuso. Subject line's blank. It's been in drafts since the 30th of March. 4 attachments, swapped out twice as the files got better. At 1:46 and change, the trace comes up. Small, 2.6 seconds. 31 decibels over the floor, which is nothing. Which is a truck on a manhole lid. Which is a thing you filter. 11 hydrants catch it. The 2 deep piezometers catch the head change. 4 millimeters, also nothing. 9th one since the event. 4/10 of a second earlier than the 8th, the way the last 8 have been, the way the 14 before them were, holding to the drift like something being wound. I run the timing twice, because the first number is never the one you write. Then I open the log, their schema, their server, and the sentence I'm about to type is reviewable for 180 days by a man named Grant. And I enter it anyway, with the amplitude and the offset and the well responses, because it's a real measurement, and real measurements go in the log. The email is still in drafts. My thumb is on the screen, and the screen has gone dark and lit up again twice while I've been sitting here. 1:52. Wind's dropped. I've got about 2 hours of good quiet left. And if I start the truck now for the heat, I lose the rest of the window. So I'm going to sit here with my hands under my legs and listen to a soybean field until 4.